the trees of the field will clap their hands. And all the trees of the field will clap their hands. The trees of the field will clap their hands. The trees of the field will clap their hands as you go out with joy. Are you feeling the joy of it being finally Friday and the end of the week and the weekend's here and we get to enjoy this island of time? I love that, island of time. Time marches on, and then you have this little island. An island. Thank you, God, for this island. Okay. Oh, wake up, Israel, put off your slumber, and the truth shall make you free. For out of Zion comes your Redeemer in the year of Jubilee. Oh, hallelujah, oh, hallelujah, hallelujah, praise the Lord. Oh, hallelujah, oh, hallelujah, hallelujah, praise the Lord. For in the furnace of much affliction I have chosen you, behold. And so for iron I'll give you silver, and for brass I'll give you gold. Oh, hallelujah, oh, hallelujah, hallelujah, praise the Lord. Oh, hallelujah, oh, hallelujah, hallelujah, praise the Lord. You are my chosen, for I have sought you. You are graven on my hand, and I will gather those who are scattered. They shall come back to their land. Oh, hallelujah, oh, hallelujah, hallelujah, praise the Lord. 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 All right, are we awake? Mostly? Good, okay. We want to be contemplative, we want to be thoughtful, but it's so close to sleepy that it's just slips over sometimes. Let's try to keep talking to me now. Garrett, let's try to keep that, stay awake here. Oh, say shalom in Ramah. Oh, say shalom aleinu. Be'achad Yisrael.
Pick which one you want to read.
Say shalom in Ramah. Say shalom aleinu. Be'achad Yisrael. Ve'imru amen. Ya'aseh shalom. Ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu, Yaakov Yisrael. Ya'aseh shalom, 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 Ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu, Yaakov Yisrael. love the Lord 'cause He hears my voice. I love the Lord 'cause He hears my cry. I love the Lord 'cause He hears my prayer. Turning His ear always to me. Turning His ear always to me. Call on His name, He will always hear you. Call on the name of Yeshua our Lord. Call on His name, He is always hear you. Call on the name of Yeshua our Lord. Because He is faithful, I'll call Him all my days. Because He is faithful, I'll call on the Lord. Because He is faithful, I'll call on Him all my days. Because He is faithful, I'll call on the Lord. Call on His name, He will always hear you. Call on the name of Yeshua our Lord. Call on His name, He is always near you. Call on the name of Yeshua our Lord. Because He is faithful, I'll call on Him all my days. Because He is faithful, I'll call on the Lord. Because He is faithful, I'll call on Him all my days. Because He is faithful, I'll call on the Lord. Did we hear it? I'm always worried about that last one. All right. Sing hallelujah.
So are we going to do this one around?
We'll play it around 440, 441, whatever it is. Sing hallelujah to the Lord.
Hallelujah to the Lord.
Sing hallelujah to the Lord. Sing hallelujah. Sing hallelujah. Sing hallelujah to the Lord. Yeshua is coming back again.
Yeshua is coming back.
Yeshua is coming back again. Yeshua is coming. Yeshua is coming. Yeshua is coming back again. He will come back to save His own.
He will come back to save His
He will come back to save His own.
That's right. Again.
Good evening. Shabbat Shalom. How's everyone? Do you want the good news or the bad news? Okay, good news and okay news. Not bad, but okay. Which one? Okay, the good news. Here we go. Here it is. Dun, 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 dun. The snowballs can live on because the air is cool enough in here, is it not? Yes, and because we have garnered enough money to also go ahead and get that patch in the roof over in the other building. The upstairs of the grand ballroom, that's a separate building, was built on here separately, a little bit newer. But yay, yay, yay you, yay the Lord. We're very happy about this. Okay, now the okay news. Well, I think John and Matt came in on Wednesday and said, oh, that air conditioning is not working at all. And so before we panic and before we just rip this right up, we go, I wonder what happened. Maybe it's an electrical problem. And I don't know, you have to ask them after why they might have thought that. And they called Duke Energy, and believe it or not, Duke was helpful. And they said, yes, it is due to a lightning strike. But it has been, the blower of that one has been fixed already. So see this? So we might want to put more on here and not rip it up quite yet. But it is really good, is the answer to why on earth are those related. Because we had enough money to be able to pay for the blower on that one.
Oh, good.
Right?
Awesome.
Yeah.
So we're not sitting here tonight in the sauna effect that we have out in the parking lot. I don't enjoy those services where I have to sit in the parking lot. Do you? But anyway, God continues to give. He doesn't stop giving because of one set of circumstances. He doesn't begin giving because of one set of circumstances. And so this is good news. This is probably the best news of all. And we thank you. And we thank God for bringing us to the season where we had to replace the blower in that one. But we do appreciate everything that people give, especially in this high holiday time, when we're here all the time. And when you're here more than once a week, you begin to see things that are not quite the way you'd like to see them. And that's okay too. Keep them in your mind, or you can express them to one or two people, because things are always going on under the surface. We're always making plans. We always thinking about projects, thinking about doing things. If you have anything special that does not have to do with new seats in here, already got you. We already got that. Cross that off your list. It's on the list. New roof. Well, partially done. It's on the list. You don't have to. Anything else? I could think of a few more things, but I won't bore you with all the housekeeping duties, at least not tonight. Well, we are wrapping up a very great holiday season. Yes?
Yes.
Yeah, very
Yeah.
nice holiday season. Yes, I will say. We have a sukkah out there. It works great. How many did people come? I saw people coming in to eat in the sukkah. Is anybody here who ate in the sukkah during the week? Yeah, it's great, isn't it? It's quiet. Did they come and do the ceremony for you and everything? See, it's really great. And you still have a couple days to do that, because the holiday does not end until Tuesday, I believe. Monday night, beautiful Monday night, is the last high holiday that this congregation will be celebrating as a body. It's the most fun. Okay, Purim is right up there for fun, and then we have Simchat Torah. They're really different kinds of fun, but we get to have a lot of fun at the end of the holiday season. It is a time of rejoicing. The name is Simchat Torah, and it literally means we rejoice in the Torah. Well, that seems like a boring holiday. Aren't we happy about the scriptures all the time? Yes, but this is a special day during which time we bring the Torah scrolls and other scrolls out of their ark, and we dance with them. It's pretty great. When John and I lived in Chicago, we would go to a neighborhood where the synagogues would go into the streets and dance with the Torah scrolls. Not on the sidewalk, in the streets. They would bring their Torah scrolls. Of course, they'd have to wear their winter coats, their hats, their mittens, and sometimes boots, but they had Simchat Torah in the streets. No, we don't have to do that here because we're ashamed of our faith. No, that's not why we don't have to do that here. That would not be a good idea for the traffic. But in your heart on Monday, you should be dancing in the street. And we'll pretend this is a big long street like in Chicago. They would go up and down the side streets outside of the synagogues. Truly a happy holiday, and one that kids love because they never forget seeing the adults dancing with the Torah scroll is something you can't replace with any other picture in a child's mind. It's a very nice thing for everyone to participate. And please try to be here Monday night, and we promise to not have it be late. But you know, it's the first day of October. Do you really want to go forward into October too much more? Don't you want to sort of skip over? What should we skip over to on Tuesday? Which month shall we skip over to on Tuesday? Any suggestions?
There's some great birthdays in October, though.
Oh, okay, so don't skip October. We're going to skip November. But see, Seth and Caroline are going to come to our house for Thanksgiving, so we got to leave that in there. Well, anyway, you think about that, which month you'd like to skip, and submit papers to us about that. What else can I talk to you about other than Monday night and the MONEY situation? Well, I think that's about. I'm tired. Are you tired? Are you tired? Yeah. And actually, the holiday is really nice. I'm tired about other things. But here's what I do know: it's getting dark. Right now. It's very dark outside. Remember, like in May, it'd still be sunshine when I looked out. But we are right on schedule tonight. Shabbat always gets here on time. It's never too early. It's never too late. It never gets stuck in traffic. It never is postponed for lack of interest. And so it's time to worship the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, just as Jewish people all around the world today will be at whatever time zone they're in. They will pick the appropriate time, and they'll be worshiping the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Never forget, it's not just our little group. We are part of a worldwide group of people celebrating the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and one of our favorite holidays. Thanks for coming. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
As you've been reminded, it's still Sukkot. And so the holiday and festivity continues. Now, I should have made this apology on the first evening of Sukkot. On the first evening of Sukkot, we are now then instructed to begin to pray for rain. Thank you. I think we should have postponed it a couple days. Other thing is, tomorrow night is game night. So you can spend a few minutes in the sukkah. I'm going to guess that it'll probably be much more comfortable inside for game night. So when are we scheduled for game night? 7?
Yeah.
7 o'clock. Okay, cool. And speaking of cool, just so it's very clear, what happened is that storm that we should have prayed out of the way instead of prayed in, knocked out that blower. So that's what hit us. And just so you have some numbers to attach to what that's going to involve, it involves an extra about a couple $1,000s. So we made our goal, but now we have a little more to push towards that goal. That having been said, just to make sure everybody's clear on the same page with that, part of the tradition during the festival of Sukkot in ancient days was that the pilgrims would process up to Jerusalem. It was one of the holidays of procession or pilgrimage. And as they went up, there would be certain psalms that they would say as they went up. And some of these are listed in the insert, and we're going to use them in just a moment. It was part of God's instructions for us so we could understand how he had chosen Jerusalem as the city on which he would literally put his name. And if you look at the city of Jerusalem topographically, because of the mountains, it's shaped like a shin. Shin for Shaddai, the Lord Almighty. So he's literally put his name there. And as the people would go up, they would understand the importance and experience the reality of coming into the presence of the God of the universe. Now, as we're going to do that tonight, we will have a procession, and we will imagine, as it were, that we are part of that procession, not just here and now, but in the past. Because what we want to do is we want to understand that these things are not just relics of the past, but in a sense they're doors of opportunity to reenact and to experience a profound reality. The reality that God is literally among us and that he is going with his people. Procession will start right after the Baruch Hu, because it's as if the Baruch Hu becomes the shout from the walls of Jerusalem of the people watching the pilgrims coming. And then the pilgrims, as they approach, so to speak, Jerusalem, as they take it all in, they will respond, and you will take the part of the pilgrims, even though you'll stay seated, with the first of those psalms. And then coming back from the walls will come the shout, as those on the wall proclaim and welcome those coming. And then all of us in the third psalm will join. All right, so that's a brief outline of where we're going. And if you want to follow along, it's on pages 8 and 9. Baruch Hu Adonai Hamvorach. Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Le'olam Va'ed. Bless the Lord who is blessed. Blessed is blessed forever and ever. Blessed, praised, glorified, honored, and exalted be the name of the King of Kings, the Holy One. Blessed be he who is the first and the last, and besides him there is no God. Extol him in the heavens. Lord is his name. Rejoice in his presence. His name is more exalted than all blessing and praise. Blessed be his name, whose glorious kingdom is forever and ever. Let the name of the Lord be blessed forever and ever. And then you will respond as if you were approaching Jerusalem, as you take it all in, seeing God at his holy mountain, seeing the utmost heights of Mount Zion, seeing the city of our God as you take refuge within. So please respond. Great is the Lord,
and most worthy of praise, in the city of our God, his holy mountain. It is beautiful in its loftiness, the joy of the whole earth. Like the utmost heights of Mount Zion, the city of the great King. As we have heard, so we have seen the city of the Lord. Almighty, the city of our God. God makes her secure forever. Within her temple, O God, we do meditate on your unfailing love. Like your name, O God, your praise reaches to the ends of the earth. Your right hand is filled with righteousness.
And then coming back from the walls of the temple comes the welcome and the prodding, the urging, shout for joy to the Lord, all the earth. Worship the Lord with gladness. Come before him with joyful songs. Know that the Lord is God. It is he who has made us, and we are his people. Enter his gates, in a sense we've done that, with thanksgiving, and his courts with praise. Give thanks to him and praise his name For the Lord is good, and his love endures forever. His faithfulness continues throughout all generations. And as our pilgrims take their seats, together we all respond as if we are now in the temple enclosure. We talk about his dwelling place, the courts of the Lord. We talk about the fact that we have a place near his altar so we can dwell in his house, because one day in the court, his courts is better than 1,000 elsewhere, because we are in the house of our God. So together, please. How lovely is your dwelling place, O Lord Almighty. My soul yearns to even taste for the courts of the Lord. My heart and my flesh cry out for the living God. Even the sparrow has found a home, and the swallow a nest for herself, where she may have her young. A place near your altar, O Lord Almighty, my King and my God. Blessed are those who dwell in your house. They are ever praising you. Better is one day in your courts than 1,000 elsewhere. I would rather be a doorkeeper in the house of my God than dwell in the tents of the wicked. For the Lord God is a sun and shield. The Lord bestows favor and honor. No good thing does he withhold from those who walk blameless. O Lord Almighty, blessed is the man who trusts in you. Having arrived in the house of God, so to speak, that's the reality we should all be encountering and experiencing together this evening. We now are ready to wave the lulav. And Jacob's going to lead us in that as we remind ourselves of the privilege of walking hand in hand with God and, in fact, having him walk with us.
We wave the lulav in every direction, thus signifying the omnipresence of God. He is everywhere. He is our God. There is none else. I am prepared to follow the instructions of my Creator, who commanded us in his Torah, and take for yourselves on the first day of the fruit of goodly trees, branches of palm trees, a bough of thick-leaved trees, and willows of the brook. While I wave them, may great blessings flow on us, and holy thoughts fill us, for certainly he is the God of gods and Lord of lords. He rules below and above, and his sovereignty has dominion over all. May this observance of the instructions concerning the 4 species be accepted as fulfilling in all its details and particulars. And let the beauty of the Lord our God rest on us, and may you establish the work of our hands. May the Lord be praised forever. Amen and amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvoto v'tzivanu al netilat lulav. Deserving of praise are you, O Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who has hallowed us with your commandments and commanded us to take the lulav. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehechianu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh. Amen. Deserving of praise are you, O Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who kept us alive, sustained us, and privileged us to reach this season.
We've been privileged to reach the season. Season, of course, is Sukkot, as we mentioned before. The Sukkah has a number of meanings. I just want to share 2 of them with you very, very briefly. We're told in the Midrash that the Sukkah commemorates the first booth that was built by Abraham when he entertained God and the 2 angels. So it helps us reflect on this ongoing reality we stress, that we are in the presence of the God of the universe. Another one of the lessons concerning the meaning of the Sukkah is a a phrase that is associated with it. Simcha. Simcha can mean, as we often use it, joy, but simcha can also mean acceptance. And so we understand the reality then, through the Sukkot, of the God who's accepted us as his people. And for all these things, we are grateful. And so as is the instruction and the tradition concerning Sukkot and the other pilgrimage festivals, we read from a portion of the Hallel. The Hallel Psalms are 113 to 118. You'll see that for tonight the reading is 118 verses 20 to 29. And you will find as that's being read for you, and I'm going to ask the Hallel reader to come forward. Hallel reader. Listen for the wonderful messianic imagery and anticipation that's found within this particular reading. And Don, let's do it down here on the floor. We'll bring the microphone down.
Is it Ecclesiastes?
No, it's Psalms 118.
Psalms? Have you got Psalms? That's you. Wake up.
This is the gate of Adonai. The righteous can enter it. I am thanking you because you answered me. You became my salvation. The very rock that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. This has come from Adonai, and in our eyes it is amazing. This is the day Adonai has made, a day for us to rejoice and be glad. Please, Adonai, save us. Please, Adonai, rescue us. Blessed is he who comes in the name of Adonai. We bless you from the house of Adonai. Adonai is God, and he gives us life. Join in the pilgrim festival with branches all the way to the horns of the altar. You are my God, and I thank you. You are my God, I exalt you. Give thanks to Adonai, for he is good, for his grace continues forever.
As Don read and reminded us, this is the gate of Adonai. The righteous can enter it. With the imagery of Jacob and his children coming in, and with us placing ourselves into that same procession, so to speak, as we responded with the Psalms, we too have entered the gate of Adonai and are in his presence. And having done so, we now realize it is not only Sukkot that we celebrate, it is now time also to celebrate Shabbat. As we kindle the festival of Shabbat lights this evening, we're reminded that Shabbat stands as that permanent guarantee of the relationship we have, that we can truly enter through the gate of Adonai and come into his presence, as we have in fact pictured ourselves doing this evening.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu l'hadlik ner shel Shabbat v'shel Yom Tov. Blessed art thou, O Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who has sanctified us by your commandments and has commanded us to light candles for the holiday and for Shabbat. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat B'Yom Tov. Yeah, but now I have to do the rest of that one. I apologize. Deserving of praise are you, O Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who kept us alive, sustained us, and privileged us to reach this season.
And now, once again, we all respond for this special festival Shabbat with Shehekianu as Jacob leads us, and we join him.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehekianu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh. Amen. Deserving of praise are you, O Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who kept us alive and sustained us and privileged us to reach this season.
The lights of Shabbat have been lit, and as we look at the lights of Shabbat, we need to learn the lessons of Shabbat, or remind ourselves of the lessons we should be learning. And we find those lessons on page 153, Kabbalat Shabbat, number 3. Some of these lessons, as we consider them, are lessons which picture or reminders of Shabbat, or of Sukkot itself as well. The way we do this is, as we come to do this, is I'll ask you to join me in the opening 2 lines, join me again in the closing 2 lines. In between, I'll do those parts that are not in quotation marks, asking you to do the parts that are. Parts in quotation marks, of course, are passages of Scripture. So we begin together. Come, let us welcome Shabbat, the Queen of Days. Its radiance lights up our hearts with its glorious praise. Light reminds us of God.
The Lord is my light and my salvation.
Light reminds us of His image within us.
The human spirit is the light of the Lord.
Light reminds us of God's covenant with us.
For the mitzvah is a lamp and the Torah a light.
Light reminds us of Israel's calling.
I have made you a covenant people, a light to the nations.
Light reminds us of the world to come.
In that day it will need no light, for the Lord God will give them light.
Light reminds us of the Messiah, who said,
I am the light of the world.
Come, let us welcome Shabbat, and to God sing praise, and pray for eternal Shabbat, the end of the days. The same thing that Sukkot looks forward to as well. And what we also look forward to, as our Amida portions remind us, is to get to see the lengthening of the light of the Messiah, the time when God will restore His presence to Zion. The Amida portions, as we rise and face Jerusalem in the direction of the ark, are pages 60 to 61 and 74 to 77. Please also remember to, as you see it in the order of worship, include the Chol HaMoed editions, as you use these words to shape your response to our wonderful God. The abridged portion, and then paragraph 5. Our God and God of our ancestors, may the remembrance of Messiah, the Son of David, ascend, come, and be accepted before you for salvation, for good, for grace, for kindness, for mercy, for life, and for peace on this day of Sukkot. And may our eyes behold your return to Zion with mercy. Deserving of praise are you, O Lord, who returns your presence to Zion. You may be seated. As envisioned by the great sages of old, Messiah occupies a throne in the heavenly realms. As Elohim Asher reminds us now as we join in pages 40 and 41. He sits enthroned as he waits for the time when he will restore his presence to Zion, and when hopefully we will get to see the lengthening of the light of the sun. Pages 40 and 41.
האלוהים אשר דיבר מקדם פעמים רבות ובפרקים רבות אל האבות ביד הנביאים דיבר עלינו באחרית הימים האלה בין אשר שם ליורש כל ובידו גם עשה את העולמים וזוהר כבודו בצלם עצמותו ונושא כל בדברו רע גבורה ולכל שעשה טיהור חטאים ישב ימין In the past, God spoke to our fathers through the prophets at many times in various ways. But now, in the end of days, He has spoken to us by the Messiah, His Son, whom He appointed the heir of all things, and through whom He made the universe. The Son is the full radiance of God's glory and the flawless manifestation of His reality. He sustains all things by His powerful word. After He made atonement for sins, He sat down in the place of authority beside the majesty in heaven. True and firm, established and lasting, right and faithful, loved and treasured, desired and pleasant, feared and mighty, ordered and acceptable, good and beautiful is this word to us forever and ever.
True and firm, established and lasting, right and faithful, and so forth, is His word, is His commitment to us. And we're especially grateful for that reality. At times when we reflect on realities that are, how should we say it, sadder than others. During the Shabbat of Sukkot week is one of the traditional times when we in fact remember those who are loved ones, whether family or friends, that we have lost. So if you are remembering such at this particular time, we invite you to stand, but also to tie into that reality that His promises and His presence are true and firm, established and lasting, right and faithful, and therefore loved and treasured. Pages 28 to 31, as Jacob leads, and we respond on those pages with Kaddish.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה ועמד יפרק ירוצה וימלך מלכוצה בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי בכל בית ישראל בעגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יהי יתברך וישתבח ויתפעל ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתהלל ויתהלל שמלך ורשע בריחו לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה ואמירן בעלמה ואימהו אמן יהי שלום רב מן שמיים וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואימהו אמן עושה שלום במרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואימהו Amen. Glorified and sanctified be his great name in the world, which is created according to his will. May he cause the reign of his kingdom in your lifetime and in your days, and in the life of all the house of Israel, speedily, yes, soon, and say, Amen. May his great name be blessed forever and forever eternally. Blessed and praised, glorified and exalted, extolled and honored, adored and lauded be the name of the Holy One. Blessed be he who is high above, far above all blessings and gifts and praises and consolations which are spoken in the world. Say, Amen. May there be great peace from heaven and life for us and for all Israel. And say, Amen. He who makes peace in the heavenly realms, may he make peace for us and for all Israel, and say, Amen. Amen.
Will the rest of you please join us now in standing as we in fact find ourselves standing before the great King of the universe, like whom there is none other, and that becomes our response. Ein kamoka, truly, O Lord, there is none like you among the gods, glorious in holiness, awesome in praises, doing wonders.
Ein kamoka ba'elim Adonai, ein kamocha neder b'kodesh, nora zahilot, osei felei, osei felei. There is none like you among the gods, my Lord, and there is nothing that compares to your deeds. Your kingdom is a kingdom that endures for all eternity, and your sovereignty extends throughout all generations. Adonai Melech, Adonai Malach, Adonai Malach le'olam va'ed. The Lord reigns, the Lord has reigned, the Lord shall reign throughout eternity. The Lord will bless his people with peace.
As we now turn once again to face Jerusalem, from where he will rule, we need to remind ourselves and affirm once again that we want him to rule over our lives, throughout our lives. And so we respond with the Shema, pages 34 to 39.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kivod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. Ve'yamta et Adonai Elohecha בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אלוקים מצווך היום על לבבך, ושמרתם לבניך ודיברתם בשבתך בביתך ולכתך בדרך ושכבך ובגודך ושבתם בגותם ידיך והיו לטוטפות בעיניך ובטחתם על מזוזות זאת ביתך ובשעריך. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. Blessed be He whose glorious kingdom is eternal. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your life, and with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as reminders on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates.
You may be seated. Not only is it our custom to read from the Hallel Psalms during certain of our holidays, it's also our custom, and by our custom I mean we as the Jewish people, it's our custom to read from the Megillah, the specific one of the 5 scrolls for each of the specific holidays that we read these scrolls for. And for Sukkot we read from the Megillah, Kohelet, or Ecclesiastes. So, we'll ask our Megillah reader to please come forward. We'll begin.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvato v'tzivanu al mikra Megillah. Deserving of praise are you, O Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who has hallowed us by your commandments and instructed us concerning the reading of the Megillah.
This is Ecclesiastes 12:1 and then 6 through 13. So remember your Creator while you are young, before the evil days come, and the years approach when you will say, they no longer give me pleasure. Before the silver cord is snapped, the bowl of gold is cracked, the pitcher is shattered at the spring, the pulley is broken at the cistern, the dust returns to earth as it was, and the spirit returns to God who gave it. Pointless, meaningless, says Kohelet. Nothing matters at all. Not only was Kohelet wise, he also taught the people what he knew. Also he weighed, researched, and corrected many ethical sayings. Kohelet worked to develop an attractive writing style in which he expressed the truth straightforwardly. The sayings of the wise are as sharp as goads, and those given by leaders of assemblies are like well-fixed nails. In this case, they are presented by a single shepherd. In addition, my son, take heed. One can write many books. There's no end to it, and one can study so much that it wearies the flesh. Here is the final conclusion. Now that you have heard everything, fear God and keep his mitzvot. This is what being human is all about.
as Etz Chaim becomes a reminder of, especially of this particular text, these are words that should impact our lives. And those were the final words of the great wise man of old, Solomon himself, to remind us to not only remember our God, but also to follow through on his guidelines, let them sink deep into our lives. So we, in fact, affirm exactly that as we respond to pages 96 and 97. That's funny. May these words sink deep into our lives, renewing our days as a whole.
Etz Chaim hi lemachzikim ba v'tomchei ha'meushar derachei darchei Noam v'kol nativotei Shalom. Hashivenu Adonai Alecha v'nashuvah. Kadesh Yamenu Kekedem. Hashivenu Adonai Alecha v'nashuvah. Kadesh Yamenu Kekedem. A tree of life it is to those who take hold of it, and happy are those who support it. Its ways are ways of pleasantness, and all its paths are peace. Turn us, Lord, to you, and let us return. Renew our days as of old.
Shabbat school is now excused. Every now and again, a person requests that they be taken off the synagogue mailing list. And that's not really unusual. We find out that they were no longer interested in Or Chadash. And again, that is not necessarily unusual. A person is excited and involved in the past, and now they're no longer interested in Or Chadash or Messianic Judaism. And they'll say something like this: it was just a phase that I was passing through. Or they'll indicate that this is no longer relevant or right as far as they're concerned. And for all kinds of reasons they may bring. They've gotten involved in true Judaism, or they've gotten involved in a better version of faith. Often it's the result of being hurt, or it's the result of hurt or disappointment or offense. But it could be any one of a number of other reasons as well. And sometimes it leaves us asking the question, so what happened? What happened? Well, Yeshua answers that question, and in doing so, he reminds us of some very vital lessons about our life with him and our relationship to God. Let me set the scene for you. Now, let me take that back. I already set the scene for you last week during the drash. And if you have forgotten it or weren't here, then guess what I'm going to suggest? Click on the link and hear it. All right. But let me remind you then of the scene. And you'll find it in the insert, in one of the inserts to the bulletin, the text itself from Levi's Gospel. Yeshua leaves the house where he was speaking. And he goes outside. And the text says he not only goes outside, he sits down by the side of the lake. At which point we should be saying, so what's the big deal? That's a Doesn't sound like it's that extraordinary. Well, as it turns out, it was the common practice of the rabbis of that day when they were ready to teach their students. So the students would come to hear him. And in this case, they came to hear the great rabbi of the Galil. The crowd of people waiting to hear him teach, hear this rabbi teach, soon got so large, the text tells us, that he got into a boat so he could speak more effectively to that very large group. Get into a boat to speak more effectively to a larger group? How does that work? Well, it has to do with topography yet again, or geography. Because in a boat, if you're on a lake and you've got these people by the shore and the mountains behind them, guess what? You're in a natural amphitheater. So that's what was going on. So he was speaking to this very large group. Now, I need to say that this was not unusual for Yeshua. You see, wherever Yeshua went, he always attracted large crowds because of what he said and what he did. So we're told throughout the various of the gospel accounts that people heard him gladly, or they responded. Never before has a rabbi taught us with this kind of authority as this man has. Or in some cases, they simply wanted to make him king. The leadership in Jerusalem at the Sanhedrin, when they wanted to, how should I put it, put an end to what was going on and to stop his teachings, they realized, hey, we got to be very careful because we'll cause a riot among the crowd. Quick question. These crowds that were following Yeshua in the Galilee and in Jerusalem and in Capernaum, who were they?
Jews.
Thank you. Good answer. Jews. And in fact, you remember the scene on what's often called Palm Sunday, the crowds lined the streets as Yeshua came in and they acknowledged him. Wherever he went, he attracted large crowds. Now, if you put it all together then, as the Gospels intend you to, that means that that the Jewish people received Yeshua. They did not reject him. I'll say that again because too often people don't get this right, not necessarily in this crew, because if you guys were saying it, then I'd be truly disappointed. I'd turn in my talit and walk away. I'm still wearing it. The Jewish people, as the Gospels indicate, received Yeshua. They welcomed Yeshua. They did not reject him. And in fact, we're told in the book of Acts, and it is, I think in that case, it was at a Shavuot where the rabbi returns to Jerusalem to celebrate another one of these pilgrimage festivals. As Yaakov, or James, Yeshua's brother, meets him, he points out that there are in Jerusalem alone tens and tens and tens of thousands of observant Jews who are followers of Yeshua. And if you add all that up, that adds up to about half of the population of Jerusalem were Messianic Jews. You with me? Half of the population of Jerusalem were Messianic Jews. We're told by some of the historians that the first 100,000 followers of Yeshua, all Messianic Jews, that by the end of the first century in Israel alone, there were 1 million Messianic Jews, which raises the question, how large was Israel at that time? It was populated by somewhere between 2 and 3 million Jewish people. 1 million of whom were Messianic Jews. The Jewish people received him, they did not reject him. But let me get back to the text. So he has attracted this large crowd as he always does. And now he's ready to teach. And he tells this rather large crowd a parable. In other words, a typical rabbinical story with a lesson woven into it. Now we know that this is an important story because it is the lead story, or the head story. It's the first paragraph of this chapter of Levi's Gospel, chapter 13. A chapter that is, in fact, a grouping of such stories or parables. And it's the key to the rest of what goes on in this chapter, and so it's very important, so I wanted to focus on it a little more with you, especially after having set some of the stage last week. So we look at the story itself, and let me provide you with what I would call story notes and background. In the ancient Near East, in Israel, farmers would scatter their seed as they were sowing their seed, as they were sowing the harvest. And as the farmer scattered his seed, it would fall in various places. In those days, paths ran around the fields, sometimes occasionally through the fields. And since they were footpaths, eventually they became too hard for the seed to root. So the birds would eat the seeds. And there were also, given the geography, topography of that place, there were also rocky places as well. Limestone bedrock was close to the surface. So in spots, the soil was not very deep. And after the rainy season in Israel, the sun gets hotter. The shallow soil heats up quickly, causing early growth. The seeds sprout, and they look like they will be the best of the crop. But the summer heat requires deep roots for survival, and the bedrock prevents that. So the plants wither before they can really grow, because they have no real roots. And then some seed falls into the thorn hedges. And the thorn hedges deprive them of sun and nourishment as the season progresses. And the plants are soon crowded out by the thorn bushes. And then there is the seed that falls on the fertile ground. And that produces crops of various yields in our particular story, 30-fold, 60-fold, 100-fold. Now, let me point out that this yield is not, shall we say, it's not extremely high for excellent ground. Your normal yield would be 30-fold. So it's within the ordinary expectations. And that's the story. So what's the point? Well, verse 9, the disciples want to know what the point is. But Yeshua says here, he who has ears to hear, let them hear. Sounds a little familiar. Last week, Ha'azinu. How did that begin? Listen, O heavens. Open your ears, so to speak, O earth. Give heed to what I'm saying. It should also sound familiar, because in a sense, we reminded ourselves of this during the Shema. Hear, O Israel. So he's saying, whoever has ears, let them hear. So let's then explore its significance as he explained this particular story to his disciples, verses 18 to 23. And the interesting thing is, as I reflected on with you last week, there are 4 responses to God here. This again should sound somewhat familiar. When we get to Passover, we have what? 4 children. We have 4 questions. You see, as I suggested before, when the rabbis sought to illustrate a point, they would often give 4 examples. So guess what we have here? Once again, 4 examples of illustrations. And they are, in fact, illustrations of 4 different kinds of response to God. And the first one, as you see in the outline, is the well-worn way, verse 19. Remember, as I mentioned, the paths around and through the fields were continually walked on. So the ground got well-worn and very hard, and the seed couldn't penetrate, so the seed becomes bird seed. The birds snatch it up as it lies exposed on the hard ground before it has a chance to do any good. So what is the imagery that's involved here? Well, birds were a frequent picture in Judaism of evil, whether evil influence or forces or anything along those lines. The seed is described in the Bibles that are at the end of your pews as good news. Elsewhere, that's simply described as the word or the message. But this particular seed, as we see it unfolded, is good news. Good news about what, you might ask? Well, the text tells us about the kingdom. He's talking then about the Messianic kingdom. And if he says that this is good news about the kingdom, that implies that the King Messiah is here. In other words, God has fulfilled his promises and his covenants. And when we hear that, that should be real good news. So the Bibles at the end of the pews have rightly described them for us, or effectively described them for us. The soil, we're told, is the human heart. as Dr. Patrice mentioned a number of weeks, I guess it's more like months ago, the heart is not the center of the emotions. My heart is broken. You trampled on my heart, and I will not do you the disservice of singing one of those kinds of songs for you, because it would be truly heart-wrenching. The heart is the center of the person. It's the core of a person's being. It's who he or she really is deep down. In other words, it's the place of decision and devotion. And here, the picture is that of a hardened heart. In other words, unresponsive. It's the well-worn way. And the well-worn way pictures a person who is set in their ways, who has traveled this way many times before or repeatedly. Ideas that are set in concrete. No promise of or hope of, no promise of or hope for change with this kind of person. It's the kind of person who reminds me of a saying that my father-in-law had posted in one of the guest bedrooms. Don't bother me with the facts. My mind's already all made up. That's what we're talking about. That kind of person. Like the course of a river over time, patterns and preconceptions often get in such a rut that people have difficulty seeing beyond them. Leads to blindness to new or different ideas and things. And so the response is, this can't be. And so it isn't. Or who cares? And so they don't. What's the antidote to this particular kind of soil? Now, frequently this parable is called the parable of the sower and the seed, but it's really the parable of the soils. So we're focusing on the kinds of soil here. What is the antidote to being this kind of soil? And I say this in case you know of someone whom this soil pictures. Psalm 95 verses 7 and 8 is the antidote. God says, or the psalmist says, "Oh, that you would hear him calling. He who has ears, let them hear. Oh, that you would hear him calling. Come to him. Don't harden your hearts. Don't be this kind of soil." By the way, there is a soil softener that's available to each of us. Ezekiel 36 points that out. God says, "I will take out of you your hard heart and replace it with a soft heart, a heart of flesh instead of a heart of stone." And that's related to the Spirit of God, because in those verses he says he will pour out his Spirit on us. So that's the antidote. Well, so much for the well-worn way. Then there is the rocky road. And for those of you who are getting hungry, waiting for the oneg, I'm not talking about ice cream. But it is shallow soil. In other words, the rocks are near the surface. And because of that, this kind of soil produces immediate signs of life. The produce shows great promise, the best of the crop. But the sun beating on the rootless plants soon shows up the shallowness of the soil and the lack of proper roots. No root is therefore no fruit. Easy come, easy go. And there's a term that's used here in this particular parable in the Greek. It's the word that's often translated at once, or in our translation, quickly. Easy come, easy go. Rocky road is talking about the kind of person who listens attentively to the message and responds with a great deal of enthusiasm and joy. This is a person who takes off like a shot from a gun, dynamic, alive, excited, involved, shows tremendous promise and rapid growth. And then just as suddenly, poof, they're gone. Where did they go? What happened? We're left asking. Well, the parable of the soils tell us no real root, just rocks. In other words, trouble or difficulties or problems or reversals or obstacles, or too often, and we get some of the blame for this, gossip, which produces hurt and doubt. The kind of talk that in a sense, disables people. But we talked about that several months ago when we looked at Ephesians chapter 4, so I'll just remind you of that briefly. Persecution, external pressures. These are like the sun relentlessly beating on the shallow rooted. So what happens? It dries up, it withers. It can't stand the heat. And then the text is translated, depending on the translation, it drops off, the plant does, or it falls away. The Greek term here is an interesting term. It's related to the term, it's exactly the term from which we get the term scandal. And in Greek it means a trap. So this is somebody who's been snared, who fades away and phases out because of these kinds of troubles and the heat and the pressure. Some translations have it cops out or drops out, or both. Rocky Road has to do with temporary people. They're like brush fires or kindling wood. We call them a flash in the pan. No staying power, no real commitment, therefore no solid growth. So what's the antidote to this particular kind of problem, to this particular soil, if you know anyone who fits this description? Again, back to Ephesians, which we looked at a number of months ago. This time chapter 3, beginning in verse 17. The rabbi says, to be grounded in faith, sort of fits our parable here, to be grounded in faith. And then he goes on to say, as he unwraps that further, I pray that you, being rooted and established in love, in deep roots, that you may have power, together with all the other believers, to grasp how wide and long and high and deep is the love of Yeshua, and to know this love that surpasses knowledge, so that you may be filled to the measure of all the fullness of God. That's the antidote to this kind of soil and this kind of problem. And then he says, now to him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to his power that is at work within us, to him be glory. Notice the elements of the antidote. Being grounded in faith, being deeply rooted, understanding what God has done for us, and being filled according to the power that's at work within us. Back again to the Spirit of God. It wasn't so long ago that we looked at that classic Spirit-filled text from Ephesians 5, so I remind you of that again. And if you forgot it, go back and find it on the website. All right, then there are the persistent prickers. In other words, the briar patch. And by the way, this briar patch is far more unfriendly than the one that Brer Rabbit found himself in. Thank you, I appreciate that literary response. It's a place where there's little room for growth. There is no room for fruit because other growth chokes the struggling plant. It robs it of the sun and the nourishment. It squeezes it out. A paraphrase of what the rabbi said in Romans 12:2 fits very well here. They become squeezed into the mold of society around them. Persistent prickers describes a person responding to the message, but in whom the message never really takes control. It never really takes control of the turf, quite literally. And so the plant's crowded out. It's overrun by other plants. What kind of plants might these be? Other commitments, various distractions, the kind that continually occupy our attention, persistently take up time, drain our energy or our strength. There is some life in this particular soil and some growth, but notice there is no long-term maturity and there is no lasting fruit. It's choked off by persistent sidetracking and continual diversions and good excuses. The thorns, the prickers here are described, depending on the translation, as the worries or cares of this life, or the deceitfulness or the longing for money or for wealth. Our Pew Bible translates it this way: the worries of the world and the glamour of wealth. This life, quite literally in the text, is the phrase "this age." In other words, Let me not make it in other words. That's in contrast to what Yeshua describes for us in Matthew chapter 6 in the Sermon on the Mount. He says, take a look at the lilies of the field. If God takes care of them, so you should not worry. If he takes care of them, he'll take care of you. And then he goes on to say, instead seek first, the English is usually, the kingdom of God. Oh, that sounds very lofty. What does it mean? It's real simple. He's saying, make God's business your business. Make his affairs your affair. That's what should be your primary goal. That's what he's talking about. And this briar patch is the opposite. It is misplaced priorities and misleading preoccupations. It's a longing, as described by the text, a longing that involves deceitfulness as well as desire. So you might describe it as lure and longing. It's talking about a devotion, but it's a devotion to the wrong object. Persistent, continual worries about things is part of this package. As the translation tells us, it's the lure of the world around us and the devotion to stuff that snuffs out life. Now, please note that one of the ways in which it's described is the term deceitfulness. So what the parable is telling us, what Yeshua the parable teller is telling us, is these thorns are so subtle and so persistent that we may not be aware of them, all the while we are being choked, deceitful. And so they provide great excuses for inaction. What's the antidote? Well, remember what the contrast was. Remember how God takes care of even the flowers of the field, so he will take care of you, so stop worrying. Instead, be about God's business. Make it your priority. And then finally, there's good ground. Good ground. That's the fertile soil. The soil is deep and rich enough to sustain growth. The growth may be slow, yet it's steady. But the important thing is it's successful growth. It produces the expected crop, the anticipated yield, and then some. It's not always spectacular, but it is productive. The good ground is quite obvious to the person who listens to the message, who understands and accepts it, who allows it to take root in their lives, who allows Etz Chaim to truly be not just an affirmation that we respond to as part of the service, but a reality that is an experience in our lives. It's the person who, as Joshua was told, this word will not depart from you, but you will meditate on it day and night, because in keeping it, there will be great reward, or in this case, lots of fruit. This is a person who takes the message and cultivates it rather than other things. Again, the rabbi put it this way. Seek those things which are above, where Yeshua is. Seek those things that are in the heavens above rather than the stuff that's down here, Colossians chapter 3. And so let the word of the Messiah fully fill you. Verse 16 in Colossians 3. Now please note that in this parable there are various yields for this kind of soil. It tells us, or it lets us know that there are various abilities and individual responsibilities. There's a place for everyone in this particular fertile field. Another parable Yeshua told said, well, the ruler of the state went off to a foreign country and left his servants in charge of various things. And to some, he left, 5 talents, and then another 2, and then 1. He wasn't shortchanging anyone. He was giving simply according to the abilities and the various responsibilities. There's a place for everyone. And by the way, we need to understand that fruit is not necessarily just people, but it's a productive life as well. That's why elsewhere the rabbi speaks of the fruit of the Spirit. Remember, the Spirit was the antidote to some of these soil issues. the well-worn way in the rocky road. It's a productive life as well, one which influences people. We're to live in such a way, Deuteronomy 4 tells us, that others will look at the way in which we live and they'll be attracted to it. So the question becomes for each and every one of us, are you, am I, are we like good ground? Fertile soil, do we want to be? Well, I'm going to tick off very quickly 6 guides for growth, basics or essentials, or vitamins if you would have it for being fertile soil. The first comes from one of the listeners to this parable, HaMoed, Peter. In his first letter says, desire deeply the substance of the words that God has left behind for you. And then in his next letter he says, grow in that. Second, the rabbi tells us to pray. Philippians 4, don't be anxious for anything, but in effect, turn everything over to God. Philippians 4, 6, and 7. And the peace of God will rule in your hearts. Faith is an important one. We've already talked about that from Ephesians 3. The rabbi adds in Romans 1. We move by faith from first to last. Fourth thing is proper priorities. Remember what Yeshua said? What should be your priority? To seek God's business first. And then as we looked at it several months ago, again back to the rabbi's words in Ephesians chapter 4, congregational connection and commitment. He says that's the way in which we grow. Now he uses a different image. It's not the plant growing in the soil there. It is the body as it grows and matures. Or as the reminder comes back from the author of the letter to the Hebrews. Don't abandon, don't forget the gathering of yourselves together. And the Greek word there is synagogue. In other words, he's saying, if I might paraphrase, show up at the synagogue regularly. So, are we following the guidelines? If we don't, we can't grow. And please, as an encouragement, let me remind you of the Parsha for for this particular day in Sukkot. The Parsha is Exodus 33. As it begins, God says, I will go before you. And then he says, I will go with you. So even if the difficulties get intense and threaten to choke out the life, remember the God who promises to go with us. Now, how does all this fit into Sukkot? Well, it fits into the Parsha, or built in the Parsha from last week, yes. But there's a Sukkot lesson here as well. And it's another set of 4 that parallels in one sense the 4 soils. In this particular lesson, taste represents learning, smell represents our actions as we live them before God. The 4 species. Why 4? Well, the rabbis tell us that the etrog, that lemon-like thing, has both taste and smell. The lulav has taste but not fragrance. The myrtle has smell but no taste. And the willow has neither. So each represents a different kind of person, much like our 4 soils. Some have both learning, and they have a life that reflects God, or what's often called mitzvot. Some have one without the other, and some have neither, just like our 4 soils. And yet, in some sense, we can all be bound under one sukkah and in one community. In a sense, the sower, my friends, is still out there sowing the seed. God is continually giving us the opportunity to respond to him. And as the soil, we respond in a variety of ways. Some of us are like the well-worn way, too set in our ways or our thinking, too rigid to see the new things and directions and possibilities God wants for us. And so we refuse to respond. Others of us are like the rocky road. We respond immediately and with great enthusiasm, but because there is no depth, or there is insufficient maturity, or inadequate commitment, when faced with pressures and problems, we wither and we withdraw. Still others are like the persistent prickers, continually distracted by other endeavors and involvements, always worried and drained by other concerns or commitments, or things or people who are not good enough, who don't meet our standards. So the real growth in life are crowded out. But we all need to be like the good ground, each responding to God according to our unique abilities and individual responsibilities, and producing the fruit appropriate to where we're at in the amounts that God enables. So it leaves us with the question, which of the four species, which of the four soils are we? What is our response to God this evening, to Yeshua? Remember what he says, whoever has ears, let them hear. So, what are you hearing? Are you listening? And how are you responding? Take the next minute or so in quiet in the beginnings of just such a response. Our response now continues with the Elenu, pages 102 to 107. As we have the opportunity to accept our calling and our task in preparation for the time when the time that Sukkot looks forward to is in fact the time that we get to experience when the world is perfected under the rule of the Lord Almighty. We stand. We turn to pages 102 to 107, facing Jerusalem, as we make this our response.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצא בראשית, שלא עשינו כגויה בארצות, ולא שמענו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם קלקלנו כהם, וגורלנו כחל המודם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסד הארץ, ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינה רוזו וגבי נרומים, הוא אלוהינו עדות, אמת מלכנו אפס זולתו, ככתוב בתורתו, וידעת היום והשם אותה אל לבבך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל ועל הארץ מתחת עינו. It is incumbent upon us to praise the Master of all, to exalt the Creator of the world. For he has made us distinct from the nations and unique among the families of the earth. Our destiny is not like theirs, our calling is our task. We bow down and acknowledge before the King of Kings that there is none like him. For he stretched forth the heavens like a tent and established the earth. Truly there is none like our Lord and King. As the Torah says, you shall know this day and reflect in your heart that it is the Lord who is God in the heavens above, and on the earth beneath there is none else. We hope, O Lord our God, to soon behold your majestic glory, when all abominations shall be removed, and all false gods shall be at an end. Then shall the world be perfected under the rule of the Lord Almighty, and all mankind shall call upon your name. For to you every knee must bow, and every tongue declare that you are God. Reign over us soon and forever. May the kingdom of David's greater Son be established forever. For then shall the words be fulfilled, the Lord shall be king forever, and the Lord shall be king over all the earth. On that day the Lord shall be one, and his name one. V'ne'emar v'haya Adonai lamelech al kol haaretz bayom hahu yehiye Adonai echad u'shemo echad.
You may be seated. Okay, Gary, you sat down too soon.
Tired.
Stand back up. As we conclude the service, I turn you over to Gary's hands. Gary, they're all yours.